I never thought betrayal would come from the people closest to me, my own blood, my own family, and the man I once believed was my forever. But life has a way of tearing open wounds you didn't know were there, forcing you to see truths you wish you could unsee. My name is Lucy Brown. I am a woman in my early 30s, the eldest daughter of a man who built a design empire with nothing but talent, grit, and sleepless nights. I inherited not just his company Atelier Lumiere, but also his ideals and his warnings. And perhaps most of all, I inherited his enemies. Growing up, my father was my hero. He wasn't perfect. He worked long hours, often too tired to even share dinner with us, but I admired him. His studio smelled of ink, paper, and leather, and I remember sitting by his desk as a child sketching with broken crayons while he reviewed designs for clients. His dream was larger than himself, and he nurtured it with care. He used to say to me, "Lucy, talent is nothing without integrity. Protect what you build, even if the world tries to tear it from you." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. When my father passed away suddenly 2 years ago, the responsibility of Atelier Lumiere fell to me. I was terrified, grieving, but I couldn't let his dream crumble. Our employees weren't just staff, they were family. Every designer, every seamstress, every apprentice working late into the night, they all looked to me to continue what he started. And so I did, pouring every ounce of myself into the company. But where my father had admirers, I had vultures circling, and one of them tragically was the man I thought I loved. Jeff Owen, heir to Apex Corporation, one of the country's most powerful conglomerates. On the surface, Jeff was everything a woman could dream of, tall, charming, with that magnetic charisma that could fill a room. For a time, I believed in him. He told me he loved me, that he admired my work, that together we could be unstoppable. But after my father's death, his mask began to slip. He grew colder, impatient, his ambitions seeping into every word. He pressured me to merge Atelier Lumiere with Apex, calling it a strategic partnership. But I knew better. Apex was drowning in debt from reckless investments, and Jeff saw my company as nothing more than a lifeline, a jewel to add to his crumbling crown. I refused him again and again. My company wasn't for sale, not to him, not to anyone. That defiance I see now sealed my fate. It started subtly. Jeff arranged an overseas trip for me, a surprise, he said, right before a critical design competition in Italy. He framed it as a chance to rest, to recharge. My younger sister, Alyssa, handed me the travel details with her sweet smile. "You've been working too hard," she said. "Jeff thought you could use this." I should have questioned it. Alyssa had always been drawn to shiny things, jewelry, clothes, the illusion of glamour. I knew she envied me, though she never said it outright. She was the dreamy younger sister, the one who always compared herself to me. And yet I wanted to believe in her kindness. I wanted to believe Jeff still had some care left for me. So I went. Italy was breathtaking. I poured myself into the competition, my designs shimmering under the spotlights. When I won the grand prize, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this victory would silence Jeff's endless talk of mergers. Maybe he would finally respect my vision. I remember smiling on the flight home, exhausted but proud, clutching the award in my lap as though it were a shield. But the moment I opened the door to my apartment, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air smelled of vanilla, Alyssa's perfume. I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and froze. My mother's lace wedding dress, the one I had preserved after her passing, was gone. My heart began to pound violently in my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but dread clawed at me. Then my phone rang. It was Sandra, my best friend and trusted lawyer. Her voice was unusually calm, and that calmness terrified me. "Lucy," she said gently, "you need to sit down. Alyssa and Jeff, they got married yesterday, in your wedding dress." Her words echoed in my mind, each syllable slicing deeper than a knife. Married. My sister and my fiancé. In the dress my mother once wore, the dress I had dreamed of walking down the aisle in. I opened Instagram with trembling fingers. And there it was. Alyssa beaming in my dress, clinging to Jeff's arm, surrounded by flowers and champagne and applause. Captioned in Alyssa's voice, "Sometimes love and business don't wait." Sorry, Lucy. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The world I had built collapsed in that instant. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation, public and merciless. But worse was the realization this wasn't just about Jeff falling out of love or Alyssa succumbing to envy. This was about power, about my company, about everything my father left behind. The rage that rose inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I thought of my father's last words to me on his deathbed: Jeff is too ambitious. Don't lose yourself, Lucy. My hands shook as I whispered into the empty room. Dad, you were right. You were so right. And then, as though to confirm my fears, the next blow landed. Kevin, our loyal head of accounting, called me in a panic. Lucy, he said, Jeff's demanding an emergency shareholders meeting. The agenda: your dismissal as CEO and a full merger with Apex. It all clicked into place. The trip, the wedding, the spectacle. It was all a setup to push me out, to strip me of my company while I was out of the country. For a moment, despair consumed me. I sank into the chair in my study, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. How could I fight them both, my sister and the man I once trusted? How could I face an entire corporation bent on devouring me? But then I remembered who I was. I wasn't just a broken-hearted woman. I wasn't just a betrayed sister. I was my father's daughter, and this was my war now. I called Sandra back, my voice steadier this time. I don't have time to cry. This is war. She exhaled with relief. I've been waiting to hear that voice. Where do we start? And so it began. I hired the best IT investigator money could buy, Zero, a former white hat hacker with connections in the underground. He could dig into Jeff's laptop, his phone, Apex's servers, uncovering the secrets Jeff thought he had buried. At the same time, Sandra began preparing legal grounds to challenge Jeff's marriage to Alyssa, to expose their fraud, to attack from every angle. But it wasn't enough to just fight back. I needed proof. Proof that would destroy them, not only in the boardroom, but in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of society, in the eyes of everyone who ever thought they could humiliate me. That night, I went to my father's study in the villa. I pulled out the leather-bound journal he had left me, along with a black USB drive sealed with a password I had never cracked. In his journal, he had written warnings about the Owen family, about Jeff's ruthlessness, about dangers I hadn't understood then. But now, staring at those pages, I knew. My father had foreseen this, and he had left me a weapon. Had left me. I gripped the USB tightly in my hand, whispering into the silence. Jeff. Alyssa. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. The next morning, I sat in the conference room of Atelier Lumière, with Sandra by my side, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The board members shuffled nervously, their eyes darting between the glossy folder in Jeff's hand and my face. My sister Alyssa arrived late. Of course, her entrance was always a performance. She wore my mother's pearls, her smile sweet, her hand looped through Jeff's arm as if to say, "Look at what I've stolen and look how proud I am." Jeff stood at the head of the table, his voice calm but edged with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. "Atelier. Lumière is a beautiful house, but a fragile one. In today's market, small firms like this cannot survive. That is why we propose merging with Apex Corporation. With Alyssa and I leading together, this company can finally evolve." His words burned me like acid. He said it so smoothly, as if I had never existed, as if he could erase me with a single sentence. My fingers dug into the armrest of my chair. Sandra leaned closer and whispered, "Wait. Don't strike too soon. Let him overplay his hand." I forced myself to breathe, to watch. The board members shifted uneasily, some nodding at Jeff's arguments, others glancing at me with pity. Alyssa leaned toward the table, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "My sister has been under great stress since Father's passing. I think it's time she rested while Jeff and I take care of things." Rested. That word felt like a slap. I had spent every night since our father's death keeping this company alive while she had lounged at luxury resorts and squandered money she didn't earn. And now she dared to paint me as weak and capable. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The room hushed. "You speak as if I'm not here, Alyssa," I said, my voice steady, though my chest trembled. "You wear my mother's pearls. You wore her dress at your wedding, and you dare to call yourself my replacement? Alyssa's smile faltered, but Jeff placed a hand on her back, urging her to stay composed. Lucy, he said smoothly, this isn't personal, it's business. I met his eyes, letting the rage I had bottled for days burn through me. It became personal the moment you betrayed me in my own home. Gasps rippled through the room. Jeff's mask cracked for a brief second before he recovered, but the damage was done. I had named it betrayal in front of everyone. Sandra placed a file on the table and slid it toward the board members. For the record, she said, we have concerns about Apex's financial stability. Independent analysis suggests they are billions in debt. A merger would not be a salvation for Atelier Lumiere but a death sentence. Whispers spread like wildfire. Jeff's jaw tightened. Alyssa shifted uncomfortably, realizing perhaps for the first time that this wasn't going to be as effortless as she imagined. But the meeting ended without resolution. The board called for a week to review the proposal. 1 week to prove Jeff was a fraud, 1 week to show Alyssa for what she truly was. That night, back at my villa, I unlocked my father's old study. I pulled the black USB from the drawer and handed it to Zero, the investigator I had hired. His fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code spilling across the screen. Hours later, he whistled. Your dad was brilliant. He kept detailed files on Apex contracts, shell companies' offshore accounts. And look at this. He pointed to a folder labeled Project Falcon. Inside were documents showing Jeff had siphoned millions from Apex into personal accounts under dummy corporations. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, the kind of evidence that could topple an empire. My breath caught. So my father knew. Zero nodded. He must have suspected Jeff even back then. He left this for you knowing you'd need it. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tears filling my eyes. Even from the grave, my father was protecting me. Thank you, Dad, I whispered into the dark. But proof alone wasn't enough. Jeff and Alyssa were master manipulators. They would spin any narrative, paint me as bitter, unstable, jealous. I needed to be careful. I needed timing, precision. 2 nights later, Sandra invited me to a gala hosted by Apex. It was risky, but she insisted. If you want to win this war, you have to let them reveal themselves in public. Sometimes arrogance is your best weapon. I arrived in a gown of black silk, my father's cuff bracelet around my wrist. Heads turned as I entered, whispers following me. Across the ballroom I saw them, Jeff in a tailored suit, Alyssa shimmering in a sequined dress, her fingers sparkling with diamonds. She clung to him like a trophy, parading herself as Mrs. Owen. When her eyes met mine, she didn't flinch. She raised her glass, smirking as if daring me to confront her. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Later, as the speeches began, Jeff took the stage. His voice boomed through the hall as he praised Apex's legacy, their vision for the future, and Alyssa as his partner in life and business. Cameras flashed. Investors applauded. But then he made a mistake. Together, he declared, we will bring Atelier Lumiere under our wing. It is no longer Lucy's burden to carry, it is ours. My blood boiled. The audacity of it, claiming my company, my father's legacy, in front of hundreds of witnesses. Sandra's hand gripped mine. Good, let him boast, it's all on record now. I excused myself before the applause ended. I couldn't breathe. In the hallway, I leaned against the cold marble wall, my heart racing. Images flooded my mind, my mother's wedding dress on Alyssa's body, Jeff's hand on her waist, the smug look in their eyes as they tried to erase me. Rage pulsed through me, hot and unrelenting. That night, I sat at my desk, the documents from the USB spread before me like weapons. My father's handwriting in the margins seemed to whisper, protect what you build. And I made a vow. I would not let Alyssa steal my identity. I would not let Jeff turn my company into his lifeboat. I would not be erased. The war had only begun. The following days were a storm of whispers, meetings, and shadows. News of Jeff's announcement at the gala spread quickly through business circles. Overnight, my name was dragged into headlines I hadn't written. Atelier Lumiere to merge with Apex under Jeff Owen's vision. Lucy Brown steps back, amid family realignment. Each line felt like an erasure, stripping me of my place in the company my father and I had fought so hard to build. I sat in my office staring at the morning papers, my fingers trembling. Sandra stormed in her heels, striking the marble floor like gunshots. She slapped another stack of documents onto my desk. He's moving faster than we thought. Jeff filed preliminary paperwork with the business registry. If we don't counter this within the week, they'll steamroll you out legally. I clenched my jaw. Then we don't wait, we strike now. Sandra's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. We can't just accuse him. We need irrefutable proof. The board won't take your word against his unless we show them everything: fraud, embezzlement, the works. Her words sank into me like ice water. I knew she was right. It wasn't enough to reveal the betrayal of my heart or even the humiliation of my sister's treachery. Business was colder, harsher. It demanded evidence, not emotion. That night, I called Zero again. He met me at the villa, his laptop glowing in the dim light of my father's old study. I've dug deeper, he said, scrolling through endless spreadsheets and offshore transfers. Jeff's been hiding Apex's debts under subsidiaries in the Caymans. He's been moving money for years. And here he opened a folder of scanned contracts. This one's explosive. He used Alyssa's name as a beneficiary. She's complicit. My breath caught. My sister wasn't just his pawn, she was his partner in crime. I stared at the documents, my hands shaking with a cocktail of rage and grief. Alyssa had always wanted what I had, but to think she had become the face of his schemes, signing papers, laundering his mess, standing proudly beside him while the company he devoured crumbled, was a betrayal I hadn't prepared for. I pressed my palms against the desk, whispering through clenched teeth. She chose him over me. She chose his money over blood. Zero looked at me cautiously. What do you want to do with this? My answer was immediate. We burn them with their own lies, publicly, no mercy. Still at night when I lay awake, the war between my anger and my sorrow consumed me. I remembered Alyssa as a little girl trailing after me with her ribbons, begging me to share my crayons, crying when she lost at games. There had been a time I thought she loved me. Had that ever been real? Or had envy always been her heartbeat? 3 nights before the board's final decision, I received a letter. It was Alyssa's handwriting, curly, precise, almost theatrical. My chest tightened as I unfolded it. Lucy, it began. You must understand that I've only done what I had to do. You always had Father's love, his company, his approval. I had nothing. Jeff sees me, and he gives me what you never would. You'll be fine, you always land on your feet. But don't try to fight us. You'll only embarrass yourself more. The paper crumpled in my hand. Tears blurred my vision, not from weakness, but from the sheer audacity of her words. She had stolen my fiancé, my wedding dress, my company's future, and yet she saw herself as the victim. I wanted to scream, to tear the letter to shreds, but instead I tucked it into my desk drawer. Evidence. Proof of her complicity, proof of her delusion. The next day, the board meeting reconvened. Jeff and Alyssa arrived arm in arm, their confidence radiating like poison. Jeff carried another sleek folder of merger benefits, while Alyssa smirked as though she had already won. I stood at the end of the long mahogany table, the documents from the USB neatly stacked before me. Sandra nodded at me from across the room, her eyes sharp, ready. Jeff began his pitch again, painting Apex as the savior, Alyssa as the bridge between families, and me as the exhausted daughter unfit to lead. His words were honeyed venom, and some of the board nodded along, seduced by his charm. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, deliberately. You speak of saving this company, I said, my voice echoing in the hushed room. But what you are offering isn't salvation, it's a coffin. I opened the folder and slid copies of the documents across the table. Bank transfers, fake subsidiaries, offshore accounts, Alyssa's forged signature, my father's meticulous notes. Gasps erupted as the board members flipped through the pages. This can't be real, one muttered. Jeff's face drained of color. Alyssa's smile faltered, her hands trembling as she tried to gather the papers in front of her. These are lies, she hissed, her voice shrill. Sandra leaned forward, her tone razor sharp. We have digital verification. These aren't forgeries. This is Apex's reality. And if you merge with them, you merge with their crimes. The boardroom descended into chaos. Questions fired across the table, voices overlapping, panic palpable. Jeff tried to shout them down, but the tide had shifted. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I stood tall, my voice cutting through the noise. My father built Atelier Lumiere on integrity. I will not let it be dragged into corruption. If you side with Apex, you betray not only me, but every worker who gave their soul to this company. Silence followed. The weight of my words hung in the air. The meeting adjourned without a vote. The board demanded an independent audit. Jeff stormed out, his hand gripping Alyssa's wrist so tightly she winced. For once, they looked less like victors and more like cornered animals. That night, I sat by the window of my villa, watching the rain streak against the glass. My chest ached with exhaustion, but also with something else, hope. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. But I knew it wasn't over. People like Jeff and Alyssa didn't back down. They struck harder when cornered. And so as the storm raged outside, I whispered into the night, "Come at me. I'm ready." The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, and neither had the storm in my chest. I sat in my office with the blinds half closed, watching rivulets of water blur the city skyline, feeling as though the world itself was weeping with me. The independent audit was underway, and I knew the numbers would confirm what Zero and my father's files had already uncovered. Still, the waiting gnawed at me. Jeff and Alyssa did not stay silent. No, they struck back with ferocity. Social media bloomed with articles painting me as unstable, vindictive, unable to cope with my father's death. Anonymous sources claimed I had fabricated evidence that I was clinging to control of a company I couldn't manage. And the most vicious headlines came from Apex-owned outlets shouting Lucy Brown's emotional breakdown. Can she still lead Atelier Lumiere? Each word was a dagger. Each photo of Alyssa smiling beside Jeff was salt rubbed deep into my wounds. She looked radiant in every image, as if betrayal had given her wings. Meanwhile, I felt stripped raw, exposed. Sandra's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. "Lucy," she said firmly, standing in my doorway, "do not let them write your story. You're not broken. You're the one holding the truth." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. Truth. That was all I had. But sometimes truth alone wasn't enough. It needed a stage, an audience, a moment where it could burn through the lies. The audit results came in 2 days later, and they were damning. Apex was billions in debt, drowning in unpaid loans hidden through offshore subsidiaries. Jeff had siphoned millions into personal accounts, using Alyssa's name as a beneficiary. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, it was all laid bare. The auditors presented their findings to the board of Atelier Lumiere, and for the first time the room tilted in my favor. Yet Jeff wasn't finished. He stormed into the meeting, Alyssa clinging to his arm, and slammed his hands against the table. "This is a setup," he roared. "Lucy orchestrated this with her so-called investigator. She planted these documents. You can't believe this circus." But the documents spoke louder than his rage. The auditors had verified them independently. Zero had ensured every trail led back to Jeff's fingerprints. And still, Alyssa tried to play her part. Her voice quavered as she clutched her pearls. "My sister has always been jealous of me. She can't stand to see me happy. She's willing to destroy me to protect her pride." I turned to her slowly, my voice soft but sharp as glass. "Happy you married the man I loved in my mother's dress. You stood by while he tried to erase me. That isn't happiness, Alyssa. That's greed dressed in lace." Gasps rippled through the room. Alyssa's face crumpled for a moment before she forced a smile, but the cracks were showing. The board announced their decision. The merger proposal was rejected. Jeff and Alyssa were barred from attending future meetings pending further legal review. It was a victory, but not the end. I could see it in Jeff's eyes, dark, furious, calculating. He would not go quietly. Days later, I received an invitation that felt like a trap, the Apex annual gala where Jeff and Alyssa were to be honored as visionaries. Against every instinct, I knew I had to attend. Not to celebrate, but to end this once and for all. Sandra tried to dissuade me. "It's dangerous," she warned. "He'll spin it. He'll use the stage to humiliate you." I shook my head. "No. He underestimates me. He always has. It's time I show him who I really am." The night of the gala, I wore a gown of deep crimson silk, bold and unapologetic. My father's cuff bracelet gleamed on my wrist, his silent blessing. As I entered the hall, conversations stilled. Cameras turned. I felt the weight of every gaze, but I walked tall, my heels clicking against marble like the beat of war drums. Jeff spotted me first. His smile faltered, then sharpened into something predatory. Alyssa's eyes widened, her hand tightening on his arm. I offered them both a polite nod, the kind reserved for enemies about to fall. The speeches began. Jeff took the stage, his charisma polished, his lies rehearsed. Apex stands stronger than ever, he declared with Alyssa by my side. Together we are building a future where family and business unite. The applause was loud, cameras flashing, investors nodding along. But then with Sandra's signal, the lights dimmed and the screens behind Jeff flickered to life. One by one, the documents appeared. Wire transfers, fake subsidiaries, offshore accounts. Alyssa's name on fraudulent papers, audio recordings of Jeff pressuring accountants, and finally a video Jeff bragging to an associate about squeezing Atelier Lumiere dry. The room fell silent. The applause died mid-clap. Jeff froze, his face drained of color. Alyssa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sandra's voice rang out from the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the man and woman you've been applauding. A thief, a fraud, a betrayal not just of family but of every one of you who trusted them. Chaos erupted. Journalists surged forward. Investors shouted, demanding answers. Jeff stammered, his mask shattering, while Alyssa burst into tears, clutching his arm as though drowning. I stepped forward, my voice carrying above the noise. You tried to erase me. You tried to erase my father's legacy. But tonight the truth erased you. Flashbulbs blinded me, but I didn't flinch. For the first time I felt the power of my father's words living through me. Protect what you build. Jeff was escorted out by security, Alyssa trailing behind him, her tears smearing her mascara. The crowd parted as they passed, no longer admiring but recoiling. Their empire had crumbled in one night. Later, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the cool air filling my lungs, Sandra joined me. It's over, she said softly. I shook my head. No, it's just beginning. I still have to rebuild, I still have to heal. But deep inside, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The girl who once sought love from her sister, validation from her fiancé, approval from her board, she was gone. In her place stood a woman forged by betrayal, tempered by truth, unbroken by lies. And I would never let anyone erase me again. The morning after the gala, the world awoke to headlines that made my chest ache with a mixture of relief and grief. Jeff Owen exposed Apex faces. Fraud investigation. Sister act of betrayal. Alyssa Brown, caught in financial scandal. Atelier Lumiere stands strong under Lucy Brown's leadership. I sat on the veranda of my villa with a cup of black coffee, the ocean breeze cool against my skin. For the first time in months, I felt the weight in my chest lighten, as if the storm had finally begun to clear. The truth was out. Their lies had collapsed under their own greed. Yet victory did not taste sweet. It was bitter, laced with the ashes of everything I had lost. My sister, the man I once believed would share my life, the innocence of believing blood and love would protect me, all of it gone. Sandra came to see me later that afternoon. She set her briefcase down with a sigh and looked at me with the compassion of someone who had walked every painful step beside me. The authorities are moving quickly, she said. Jeff may face prison time. Alyssa, if she cooperates, she might avoid it, but her reputation is destroyed. She'll never recover socially. You've won, Lucy. Won. The word sat heavy in my stomach. I stared out at the waves crashing against the rocks. If winning means losing my sister forever, then what exactly did I win? Sandra didn't answer right away. She simply sat beside me, her silence respectful, allowing me the space to breathe through my own thoughts. Finally, she said quietly, sometimes victory isn't about what you gain. It's about what you protect. You still have Atelier Lumiere. You still have your father's dream. And you still have yourself. Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I walked through the empty halls of the atelier, the scent of fabric and leather carrying echoes of my childhood. I thought of my father hunched over his sketches, the glow of a desk lamp illuminating his face as he whispered, "Protect what you build." I touched the edge of his old drafting table and felt tears blur my vision. I had protected it. Against vultures, against betrayal, against my own family, I had stood firm. But at what costs? A week later, the board officially reinstated me as CEO, issuing a public statement praising my integrity and condemning Jeff and Alyssa's deception. Employees gathered in the main hall applauding me with tears in their eyes, telling me they were proud to work under my leadership. Their voices swelled a chorus of loyalty, and for the first time in months, I felt something warm bloom in my chest belonging. Still, when I returned home that evening, the emptiness returned. My phone buzzed with messages, clients congratulating me, friends checking in, journalists begging for interviews. But one message froze me. It was from Alyssa. Lucy. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted what you had. I thought Jeff would give it to me. Please believe me. I didn't think he would drag me into this mess. Please. I'm still your sister. My throat tightened. I read the message again and again, searching for sincerity, for remorse for the sister I once loved. But all I saw was desperation, the same hunger that had driven her to steal my fiancé, my dress, my legacy. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I couldn't save her. Some wounds cut too deep, some choices cannot be undone. Instead, I sat on the balcony that night, with a glass of wine, watching the stars shimmer above the sea. I whispered into the wind as though speaking to my father. I protected what we built, but I couldn't protect her. Maybe that was never my job. Weeks turned into months. Apex crumbled under investigation, Jeff's name dragged through courtrooms and tabloids alike. Alyssa vanished from public life, her once bright image drowned in scandal. Atelier Lumiere thrived, clients flooding in, inspired not only by our designs, but by the story of survival behind them. I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I poured my grief and rage into creation, designing collections that spoke of resilience, betrayal, and rebirth. Dresses stitched with strength, jackets cut with sharp lines of defiance, gowns flowing with the softness of forgiveness I had not yet found, but hoped someday I would. Each piece was a confession, a scar turned into art, and slowly I found peace. One evening, after a long day at the atelier, I returned to the villa to find Sandra waiting on the deck with 2 glasses of champagne. She raised hers with a smile. To surviving the storm. I clinked my glass against hers, the bubbles tickling my lips as I drank. To surviving, I echoed. We stood in silence for a while, the sound of the ocean filling the spaces where words were unnecessary. Finally, I turned to her, my voice soft but resolute. You know, Sandra, I don't think revenge was ever the point. It wasn't about destroying them. It was about saving me. She nodded, her eyes gleaming in the twilight. And you did. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything I had endured. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation. But also the strength I had discovered, the courage I had unearthed, the clarity I had gained. Life had stripped me bare, but it had also rebuilt me into something stronger, sharper, unbreakable. I closed my eyes with a final thought. I may have lost a sister, but I found myself. And maybe in the end, that was the lesson my father wanted me to learn all along. If you've stayed with me until the end of my story, thank you. If my journey touched you in any way, please like this video, share it with someone who might need courage, subscribe for more stories like mine, and leave me a comment below. Tell me, have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted most? How did you rise from it? Because betrayal may break us, but survival reshapes us. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be erased.